Thank you all. We have a quorum, and it is also the appointed time for the meeting. Let me call the meeting to order. This is the Subcommittee on Antiquities and Monuments Declaration of Historical Buildings No. 2 Notice 2013. The first thing is to elect a chairman of the subcommittee. Can we have some nominations, please? And any valid nomination has to be made orally by a member, and we need at least another seconder seconding it in oral form. And then it has to be accepted by the member nominated. Mr. Sim Chung Kai, I nominate Mr. K.K. Kwok. Any seconder, Mr. Gary Fan. Mr. K.K. Kwok, do you accept nomination? Yes. Do we have other nominations? Any other nominations? If not, Dr. K.K. Kwok, can you please take the chair? Thank you, members, for your support. Let us now ask the administration team to come in. Do we need a deputy chairman? I don't think so. I think this will be easy and quick. Let us invite the administration to come in. Okay, you're queuing up to speak. All right, I know that. Can I ask a question first? Yes, I know that. In fact, I can ask the question now, and you can do the follow-up for me. No, we'll allow the administration to say something first. The paper itself is rather easy. Why, Ms. Chen Yunhan says this may be a policy issue rather. Welcome to you, officials. I will introduce you one by one. Members present here actually have other meetings. So I hope you will take us briefly, really briefly through the paper. The paper itself is rather self-explanatory. Keep your introduction brief, and then we'll open the floor to members' questions. Who will take us through the paper, please? Ms. Koh. Thank you, Chairman. We have declared monuments and also historical buildings grade 1, 2, 3. Monuments have the highest value in Hong Kong in the present policy. Only grade 1 historical buildings will have a chance to be listed as monuments. Monuments are protected by the AMO. If anyone would have to make any conversion or change the monuments in any way, he will first of all have to seek a permit from the S for development. This Antiquities and Monuments Ordinance Declaration of Historical Buildings No. 2 Notice 2013 seeks to declare Phat Tet Tong in Wo Hang in New Territories and Tat Tak Communal Hall in Yuen Long as monuments. I know that members would like to ask questions about the Declaration of Monuments, and we are quite happy to give you the information. The first member asking a question, Ms. Sit Ho, 5 minutes each. Thank you, Chairman. I must apologize. I have to ask the question and then I will go. I will listen to the audio tape for the reply from officials because I am at another meeting. I'd like to know more about the maintenance cost. We are going to declare this as monument. Sometimes the owner of the property will agree, sometimes they don't, and they would think that we declared it as monuments, so we are in the way of them demolishing the building. With regard to the second grade 1 historical building, Tat Tak Communal Hall, I think it's going to be a kind of cooperation, and you are going to do the works to prevent further flooding, etc. I think the works have started already. But then for Phat Tet Tong, I don't see similar arrangements. Could I know more about the owner of Phat Tet Tong? Do they agree that they would start the maintenance program jointly with the administration? If yes, what about the apportionment of cost and responsibility? I definitely would not object to spending public money on maintenance as long as that the monument will be open to the public in future. I think that is worth our while. Just like in Central and Western District, the Dr. Sun Yat-sen Memorial Museum, we acquired it, and now we have preserved this very old-style residential facility in a very ideal form. So could I ask the administration about maintenance of Pha That Tong and whether it will be open to the public in future? Secondly, what about the area in the vicinity? It's like appreciating a Chinese painting or calligraphy. The best part is not where there is ink, but where there isn't. So I'd like to know what possible developments there will be in the vicinity of Pha That Tong and how can you take the public to this monument? Thank you, Mr. Ming, Mr. Tom Ming. As we said in the paper, Tat Tak Communal Hall is now the subject of some maintenance works. When we declare Pha That Tong a monument, we were in close negotiation and consultation with the owner, and the owner supports this declaration. And they also support opening the monument to the public in future. We are applying for funds to do maintenance, and hopefully in the next financial year we can start the works. During the transitional period, they also agree that it would be open to the public, but first we might have to do some investigation about the structure to see whether we need to do any urgent repairs first. Basically, at Pha That Tong now, the original part in the middle where agricultural tools were placed, and also in the front yard there, the owner agrees that it can be open to the public. But as you know, the descendants of the owner are living at the facility, so we don't want them to be disturbed. And that's the principle. But they do support that the central portion and the front yard can be open to the public in future. Mr. Ming, Ms. Sit Ho asked about cost. At Tat Tak Communal Hall, how much maintenance cost are we talking about? That will be in 3 parts. The structure itself, that would be the responsibility of the AMO. That would be within $10 million. But there are 2 technical problems at Tat Tak. First, there is flooding in front of the building. The DSD will be doing the reinstatement works, and behind it there is a slope. The slope itself is not exactly stable, and the GEO will be working on that, so it will be in 3 parts. What about the cost, please, for the second and third parts? The AMO is going to spend less than $10 million. But as to the other 2 parts, they are the responsibility of 2 other departments. Can you give us the cost after the meeting? Yes. Since Ms. Sito is not here, she will not ask a follow-up, but Mr. Ma Fong Kwok now. Thank you, Chairman. I do support that these 2 structures will be declared monuments. But I'm aware that the first one, Pha That Tong, the descendants of the owner are living there. Later on, you say that it will be open to the public. I think there are a few problems. First of all, transportation. Now it is very inconvenient for people to go there. So apart from maintenance, what about signage and transportation and publicity? How would you link that up with the declaration of monument? And also, if the descendants are still there, how are you going to arrange for the opening up of Pha That Tong? And then Tat Tak Communal Hall. I don't exactly understand what you mean by technical problems. For example, flooding. It is said that it is 1 meter below the surrounding ground level. How are you going to do the drainage? Are you going to do it by pumping, or are you going to hoard off the area? Which concept are you going to adopt? Mr. Ming? Let me talk about Pha That Tong first. It is now within a village. It is in Hawo Hang village. Along Shuttlecock Road, there is access to the village. And then there is GMB taking people to the village. So relatively speaking, it is not within the restricted zone. It is accessible by public transport. As for opening up to the public in future, we'll be talking to the residents of Phat Tet Tong. Again, as I said, in principle, they agree to opening it up. It's just which part of the building, as I said just now, where they used to use as storage and also the front yard, they are quite happy to open those parts up to the public. As to signage, when opening up takes place, we will add the signage. But basically, it is not difficult to locate the village. As for Tat Tak Communal Hall, the flooding in front of the building, as I said, it is below ground level, and the DSD will connect the piping to the existing drainage system so that the pipes of Tat Tak will be directly connected with the existing drainage system. It is not going to be by pumping, but by connecting to the drainage system. Therefore, there is now no problem of water accumulating. Any more follow-up? I'd like to ask about Phat Tet Tong. You said there is the understanding. Will you enshrine it in a written agreement so that residents will confirm that the space agreed upon will be opened up? Because you are going to plow in a lot of resources to do the maintenance and repair and reinstatement. If after that, supposing they do not agree to opening up, then what are you going to do, Mr. Ming? Actually, the owner has given us a letter of consent. It is in written form, but it is legally binding. I can say that it is a form of agreement. When we declared the building as monument, the first step is that the owner would have to give consent according to law. And this is already secured. And incidentally, well, actually, the law does not require this to be done, but the owner also gave consent for parts of the building to be opened up, and the arrangements would be discussed later. In fact, this is necessary for this case because we'll have to see which parts of the building will be conducive for opening up according to the structural situation, and also how visitors should make their way to the building, and that has to be coordinated obviously with the residents of Phat Tet Tong. But what about the final agreement? Is that binding? That's what I'm trying to find out. Previously, after opening up of monument, now of course if the owner does not agree to opening up, then during the stage for raising objection, the owner would have spoken up. But in the entire process, the owner has supported opening up the building, and therefore this is mentioned in the agreement. In other words, this is not legally binding necessarily. Listening from you, is that the case?
I can't say that this is a requirement under the law, but then the government is committing resources to do maintenance works. So you should impose a condition. So can you do it by way of an agreement? Well, if Mr. Ming, you don't have the answer now, please try to seek advice from the DEVB before we take the proposal forward to the council. When we declare a certain building a monument, the main aim is to preserve the heritage value of the structure. Now, as for, well, the main purpose is really to preserve the building. As to whether it should be opened up, there are past cases where the historical buildings are not open for public. It really depends on the purposes of the buildings. For example, if it is a school, it is a private residence, it may not be opened up. So there might be this kind of restriction. So the aim of the law is really to preserve and conserve historical buildings. we'll try as much as we can to get the agreement from the owner to open up the building. Ms. Cole, I don't agree with you. You have two steps. First, you declare a certain building a monument, and then that's really for preserving the building. It cannot be demolished or altered in a way. And the second part is you will be spending public money on maintenance. Now, if you don't spend, say, the public money and say the owner has to be responsible for their own maintenance works. But then if we're talking about public money to do maintenance work, the electrical has the responsibility to ensure that the public has access to the buildings if public money is used. If you are going to spend huge sums of money for maintenance work and then the owner ultimately says that it will not be opened up, then I think there is a problem. So that's what Mr. Ma asked about. Now, if the government cannot give us a reply now, you can do two things. First, to see if you can supply us with the agreement later on. And secondly, perhaps you can ask the DFJ colleagues to see how valid or is the agreement legally binding. You may spend sums of money as far as sums of from the public purse, and it's our responsibility to make sure that the public can get to enjoy the buildings. Well, the ordinance doesn't have a requirement that the monuments should be opened up for visits by the public, but over the years, we have tried as much as we can to get the consent of the owners, especially for private buildings, to open up the buildings for the public. That's not a legal requirement, but over the years, many owners did give that consent. Ms. Chen Yin-Han, I'm very interested in this issue too. Are there cases where the monuments, say, are occupied or being by the owners who are staying or living there? Are there such cases, Mr. Ming? Well, there are many private buildings declared monuments. Some of them may be ancestral halls, and for this type of building, it is open already. Well, let me cite an example. In any NT development, some villagers told me that their ancestral halls have been declared monuments. How are you going to deal with those cases? Under the law or the Antiquities and Monuments Ordinance, for any buildings declared monuments, any alterations made have to be approved by the department or have to get a permit before the alterations are carried out. Now, as for the day-to-day opening, well, it depends on the purposes of the buildings. Say, for example, if it is a school, then it cannot be opened, say, any time for visits by the public. But then the schools may arrange a special open days, or there may be designated sports introducing the history of the schools. So it all depends on the original purpose of the building to see whether it should be opened up. Ms. Chen asked about residences. Grade 1 historic buildings, how are you going to deal with those buildings? Now, ancestral halls are not residences of people. What about private residences? Well, Fat Tat Tong is the first private residence building. So it means that the government doesn't have experience of this kind. So Mr. Ma has rightly pointed out that whether the descendants may like to make alterations of the buildings. Well, the monuments, say, may last several generations in terms of period. So Mr. Ma said that the government should seek a sort of consent from the owner. Now, let me add, after certain buildings have been declared monuments, any differing views from the descendants will not affect the status of the buildings. Now, Mr. Ming, well, the government may think that it will not be challenged in its decisions, but then the civil society has changed so much recently. So does the government have the confidence that it will not, say, be open to challenges just by putting in certain conditions? Now, Mr. Ming, if there are maintenance works to the monuments, a permit has first to be obtained under Section 6 of the ordinance. That would not be subject to changes, say, if people have different views, and that would not change the situation. I think the society has changed so much these days. I have doubts on the safeguards of the Antiquities and Monuments Ordinance, because this is the first building where a monument where actually there are people living there. I do have other questions about the point, the line, and the area for heritage preservation. Next one, Mr. Chen Chi-chin. Monuments are going to be conserved. So for any, say, major alteration works that have to be supervised. Now, we do have a question about the opening up of the site to the public, and we should have an agreement. Now, we put in resources to, say, do restoration works. And if ultimately they decide to close the door and not allow public to go in, do we have the right to ask them to open it up? And for Communal Hall, the works are divided into 2 stages. Can you give us more details on the 2 stages of work? According to paragraph 16, the Phase 1 restorations works commenced in July 2013, and it should be completed by the end of 2013. Is that completed already? Now, as for Phase 2, it would wait until the slope improvement works has to be completed. Now, according to paragraph 15, the flooding problem has been resolved. Now, as for the slope improvement works, that would take over 1 year. And then you would consider in 2015 whether further restoration works should be carried out. Now, it's the Communal Hall open now, or should we wait till the works have been completed in 2016 before we think about opening up the hall? Well, there are 2 structures in the Communal Hall, the front part and the rear part. Now, we've resolved the problem about drainage, and after that we would arrange for restoration work to be carried out in the front structure. As for the rear part, we'll have to wait until the slope improvement works are done, because the slope is unstable and there may be mud slip. So even if the rear parts works are to be carried out, then that would not be very safe, because we have to wait until the slope improvement works are completed. And actually, we've made all the planning. Once the slope works have been completed, we will carry out restoration works at the rear structure that is scheduled for completion in 2016. And the hall can be fully opened up after 26 or in 2016. The phase 1 works have been completed, right? Now, why is it that phase 2 has to wait until the slope works have been carried out? There may be mud-slip problems with the slope, so that's why we have to carry out slope improvement works, and that will affect the safety of the communal hall. So we have to stabilize the slope as before. We have a safe environment to carry out the other works. The slope improvement works have not started yet, right? Yes, it will be arranged in it will be completed in 2015. And then after that, we will be doing the phase 2 restoration works. Okay, Mr. Yu Si Wing. Thank you, Chairman. My first question is about Grade 1 historic buildings. Does the government have established policies on carrying out maintenance works? And what about the costs for the maintenance works, and also what will be the publicity efforts after the works have been carried out, and what is the responsibility and obligations of the owner? Does the government have any established policies regarding Grade 1 historic building? That's the first question. Secondly, I want to talk about Fat Tat Tong. Tat Community Hall is not a residence for anyone, but for Fat Tat Tong. Now, if we are to publicize it, many visitors are bound to visit the place. The owner says it's okay for the public to visit it, as long as there are good access ways and so on. Now, if visitors get more in number, the owner may be upset, and it will affect adversely the people staying or living in the place. And the descendants may have differing views from the people living here now. If it is going to be a tourist spot, there may be problems, and people's minds may change. So apart from the legislation, does the government have any other measures on this? Will the government say put up a signage here and direct the tourists to go there? And if people or tourists come in person and ask the people in person, then would there be certain arrangements in place? The owner may feel very disturbed once the visitor number gets bigger, and it will not do no good to the say to the place as a tourist spot if all these problems surface. 2 questions. Grade 1 historical building, if it is privately owned, the owner can apply for a financial assistance for maintenance and scheme, and that can help the owner to restore or maintain his building. Now, under that scheme, the cap is $1 million. Now, the owner, if it gets that subsidy, it should undertake that it will not demolish the building within 10 years, and it will open up the building for visits by the public.
Are you talking about Fat Tat Tong? Is that in this category? No, Fat Tat Tong is a Grade 1 historical building, and it will become a monument, so it is different. It's not in this category. As for Fat Tat Tong, as Mr. Ming said, he will iron out the details with the owner. But previously, historical buildings owned by private persons might not be conducive to opening up to the public throughout the year because of certain uses. So we'll discuss with them the arrangements, and the information will be uploaded to the internet to inform the public of the same. This monument is a little far away, and there are not many other tourist spots around this monument. If later on the public are going to be taken there, then perhaps we will include them in certain guided tours. This has been done for other monuments owned by private persons. So when the public go to appreciate this monument, they will have more information because we will be sending guides or docents, and then at the same time we can minimize disturbance to the owners. In the past, we tried to help the public appreciate private monuments, and the same arrangement was made. Mr. Ming, as for opening up of Phet That Tong and also the a package of facilities and measures, in fact, people have to go into a village to access Phet That Tong, and we have to discuss that with the village representative. We may have to have correspondence as well. Say, for example, we would think of having directional signs erected at certain points, and we will have to include those clearly on the plans, and we will have to show the VR the design of such signs so the VR can consult villagers. We'll do this by correspondence so we can achieve an agreement. As for the opening up arrangement, this is supported by the owner. Actually, this is the same as in other places. When monuments are opened up, it is going to be bi-directional. The visitors will also have to respect the users of the building and also the residents around, so they will not be excessively disturbed. Like in Pingshan Heritage Trail, we mentioned in a lot of publications that this has to be bi-directional. But of course, we will try to make arrangements whereby owners can facilitate the visit, but visitors should also minimize disturbance caused to the owners and also the entire village. There have been cases where there was too much noise. And the reminders had to be issued. Okay, that's it for the first round. No other members would like to speak. Mr. Gary Fan. Also like to ask about Tak Communal Hall. It's actually very close to Pingshan Heritage Trail, and in 2016, this will become one of the main tourist points or spots along Pingshan Heritage Trail. I think, as said in your paper, and also there are media reports saying that there is flooding and also landslide. But then village houses are developed in the vicinity. At the beginning, you had not considered including Tak Communal Hall when you built Pingshan Heritage Trail. Why was that? Is it that you have assessed the development of village houses in the vicinity, therefore you have waited until now before you seek to conserve Tak Communal Hall? Mr. Ming. Thank you, Chairman. As we said, Pingshan Heritage Trail was opened in 1993. At that time, we consulted the villagers as to what buildings would be appropriate for opening up to the public. The most important thing is consent of the owners, because some of them are not statutory monuments. In the past 20-odd years, we have been adding tourist spots to Pingshan Heritage Trail. After maintenance was done, and when we got the agreement of owners to open up their structures, those were added. Say the old Pingshan police station, it is turned into a Tang clan ancestral hall or office, and this is when we identify appropriate buildings, and when they can be opened up, they would be added to the heritage trail to enrich it. Any other follow-up? If not, I will use this opportunity to ask questions which have been of interest to Ms. Sit Ho. Your heritage conservation policy is quite disappointing. As Ms. Chen Yunhan said, in Kutong, Yanhua Road, and Yangyun, they are still grade 3 historical buildings, so they can be demolished. And then Yanghao Kong, as you know, the Park Shawan, there is the whole family old residence. You witnessed how they were destroyed. Developers demolished those, and you seemed to not have any feelings about those. We will not object to the declaration of these two monuments in the paper, of course, but then we are worried after listening to you, especially Fat Tat Tong. We agree that it is worth our while to maintain it and conserve it with public money. But after that, is there any guarantee so that it will be opened up to the public? Say, for example, in Kam Tong Tai, you exchanged a piece of land for development, and then you also gave some cash. And in the end, Kam Tong Tai is now wholly owned by the administration or government, so now it is this Dr. Sun Yat-sen Memorial Museum. When you talk to the descendants of Kam Tong Tai, did you talk about other arrangements, like, for example, to exchange land or exchange the development rights, or did you talk about, in fact, acquiring the entire Fat Tat Tong so that you own it, the public own it? Under the present conservation policy, we respect private property rights. We would still like to conserve such private property. While we do so, if there are private owners who are willing to conserve the buildings concerned, and if they are also happy to have their property declared as statutory monuments, the existing government policy is not to acquire the property by land exchange, and also not to take over the title or ownership of the property concerned. In terms of conservation and heritage, our view is that if we could continue with the original use at the buildings concerned, that would be the most ideal situation. If the administration would like to acquire the ownership, then the original use and the original history of the property may be affected. So if the owner concerned, especially with regard to property within villages, if the owners themselves would like to preserve the original use or existing use, and if they are happy that the property be conserved, then under our present policy, we will not seek to acquire ownership in any way. Well, I don't exactly agree. Like the yellow house or blue house in Wan Chai, the ownership is not with the administration but with URA. Originally, it was for residents and it was rented out. Now you talk about Fat Tat Tong. Even one fine day, you would agree with the owner for land exchange or acquisition. You don't need to have it for other uses. You can still rent it out to descendants of owners of Fat Tat Tong, or you can rent it out to other people who are interested in using it. There are many such examples in overseas countries, just like in Venice. It belongs to the municipal government but is rented out for people to live in, and the monument can still be preserved. This says that this is an unprecedented program. It is still going to be resided in, so it is very different from other declared monuments. I asked you, and your answer is that you have never thought about it or you have never discussed it, and even now, after it has been declared, that you would still go along that route. If not, why not? The existing policy is that unless the owner has development plans or demolition plans, will the government talk to the owner of the building so as to try to get a win-win solution, in that the owner could still exercise his private property rights and at the same time we can conserve the building. Only in that circumstance will we talk to the relevant owner any financial incentive, including land exchange. But if the owner himself is quite happy to conserve the property and he has no intention to alter it, convert it, or redevelop it, then we are not going to resort to those means. So it seems the only way forward is to get the descendants to demolish the properties concerned. Second round, Mr. Ma Fong Kwok. You actually put words into my mouth, Chairman. You actually have taken words out of my mouth. I am thinking that there should be a lot of flexibility in conserving monuments. What is the best way to conserve such buildings? Well, I agree that there can be different arrangements according to the situations, but you should not rule out what the chairman said. Because, in my view, what the chairman said would be an ultimate solution to the situation. You said it is inside a village and you would like to preserve it. Well, I agree, but you should be more proactive, so you can acquire the ownership for the city and compensate the owner if he is willing, and then we can rent it out to the descendants to live in the building. That should not be a problem. There are numerous examples throughout the whole wide world. I think you should consider it because you can also make use of the building for other purposes. And you can consider using it for different initiatives on the fronts of culture and tourism. And this is my question. After declaring this a monument, if possible, you should enter into an agreement with the descendants, which should be binding. Or else, I would question how you can guarantee that the social function assigned to this maintenance program will come to pass. Ms. Koh or Mr. Ming? It's a policy question. Mr. Ming? Just like to speak more on the agreement. As I said before it was declared a monument, the owner already wrote a letter of consent for the building to be declared a monument, and he agreed that it would be opened up. When there is a concrete arrangement for opening up the monument, we'll certainly have another series of correspondence with the owner to entrench that arrangement. And the arrangement will be made clear to all parties concerned. That will be done in due course. But how does that relate to the commitment of resources for maintenance? Well, opening up and maintenance can be dealt with quite separately. As we said, the declaration of monument means that we would first of all like to preserve the monument, and the maintenance is very necessary because we don't want the situation of the building to deteriorate. As to how we could arrange for opening up in the best way, it really depends on the uses of the buildings concerned and the different requirements. That has to be designed for the building. It could be different for schools, ancestral halls, and temples. Some of them are not open throughout the day. They may be closed at night, for example. So it depends what buildings we are talking about. I totally agree. I wouldn't like there would be too much nuisance caused to the residents. I think there must be negotiation and consultation, because after that there will be tacit understanding. And then the administration will have to do a lot of publicity and promotion. And certainly there will be people interested. They will go there, and then that will lead to some management considerations. But then that tacit understanding must be abided by all parties, or else after spending the money, if there is no social benefit, that shouldn't be the case. And I think both parties would have to stick to the arrangement. And later on, when you come here to apply for money, I don't know how we can approve it if that is not assured. We'll come back to the Finance Committee for funding support. Is that right? Yes. No. If it is below $30 million, no. So, Mr. Ma, they don't have to come to Finance Committee. They will just have, they can go ahead as they like. As we said once already, that hopefully, if you have the text of the agreement, let us have a copy. And secondly, we hope the administration will still seek legal opinion as to how legally binding that agreement is, if it is legally binding. You should answer that question. This will serve as some useful experience for you. Schools and ancestral halls are different. Basically, they should be open round the clock. They are public places, but this one is not. Mr. Ma Fong Kwok, no follow-up. Next one, Ms. Chen Yun Han.
I believe that colleagues today have raised questions which need to be considered by the LCSG and the HAB. This is a place where we would commit resources into. Now, overall speaking, I support the proposal. I think the two buildings are so beautiful. I visited some houses in Pak Chun Hong. They were not as beautiful as Fat Tat Tong, and it is a building in Pak Chun Hong, Hap Chung Ok, and it's as old as Fat Tat Tong. It's so beautiful, Fat Tat Tong. Well, we would have to do a lot of works on this building. I might have to visit the Pingshan Heritage Trail again in the New Territories. No, this has been turned into a very beautiful place. Well, actually, we can work together with the tourism sector because the neighboring area is so beautiful, and this house is so pretty. Well, I think the government should think about development on the point, a line, and an area on the whole. You are now undertaking works on individual sites, but we do have the Pingshan Heritage Trail, and the sports along that trail are not connected. Now, for Pak Chun Hong, there are 6 houses, and each one of them is so beautiful. And by the side of each house, there is a piece of farmland where crops and rice are grown. So they do deliberately try to integrate natural resources with design of the houses to turn it into an integrated whole. Now, for Fat Tat Tong, there are areas around it which could be further developed. The place is so beautiful. So it's even more beautiful than those houses in Pak Chun Hong. Now, we talk about local creative industries. We should have development. And development should be done along a point, a line, and in an area. I have asked the government to pay attention to this. For example, in Pok Fu Lam, the government plans to work with the NGOs on the dairy farm old buildings, and the Bethany church in that area too is also very beautiful. I am stunned by its beauty. I can only see such beautiful architecture in France. And in Polam village, there was this place which is also very beautiful. Now, we've got so many beautiful buildings, and 5 families or 5 houses are there in the building, and each room is connected to each other. So how is the government going to deal with such a beautiful house? Of course, I support the proposal, and as Mr. Ma rightly pointed out, the government should give more thoughts on conserving the building. Now, if, say, the descendants refuse to sell off the house to you, then Dr. Kwok's suggestion won't work. Now, for this Pak Chun Hong houses, they're open up already. These are all our natural resources. We've got this Taiwan movie, which was shot in Kending in southern Taiwan. The place has got very good natural resources, and then they add in a lot of other structures there. and then that has become a shopping paradise for all. Now, this place has become a favorite shooting site for Taiwan and mainland film directors. Now, for this Fatatong, I think it is also a place that can become a shooting spot for film directors. Our member from the tourism sector appreciates all the tourism spots in foreign places, and they are very often natural resources combined with human structures. So I think we can think along that line. Can you share the pictures with us later on? Well, there are a lot of beautiful flowers grown there in Pak Chun Hung. The place is not very big, but I think the government can really consider all these suggestions I've raised. I hope to work together with Mr. Ma Fung Kwok and the film sector to work on Tai Hum Estate. We've got old buildings there. That can also be a place for film shooting. Now, if we talk about development, we can think about building on natural resources structures, and then use the integrated place as spots for film shooting and so on. Mr. Yu Si-wing. Grade 1 historic buildings. The Fatatong is different. It's a different case. It is treating it as a monument, and which means the government proactively declares it as a monument. If I understand it correctly, it's different from the Grade 1 historic buildings. And this is a monument proactively declared by the government, right? Mr. Yu's question is about how the declaration is done. And does the government approach the descendants there, or did the descendants approach you? We're talking about two mechanisms. We're talking about the administrative grading mechanism, Grade 1 to Grade 2, Grade 3. And for that grading system, the owners can apply for subsidies for maintenance works. Now, the grading system is related to the monument declaration system, and the AMO can decide or can and can include all the Grade 1 historic buildings as potential monuments. Right, is that right? So we proactively approached the descendants, right? Yes. Now, on the mechanism, do you have this mechanism now that you are approaching the owners? The owners should meet certain requirements. Say there should be certain conditions of exchange. Say I give you $1 million for maintenance works, and in return you should open up the place as a tourism spot. And say the right to use the building, the ownership right, and so on. Does the government have any established policies on these kind of conditions? If not, then it's a good time, that it's a good opportunity that we think about this. Because this place is a place for rest, for people to live in, and it brings along with it some problems. So that's very different from, say, an ancestral halls and so on. So the government should have a mechanism to deal with this place, and it should not be treated similarly as what you did with other monuments. My second question. Of course, the Fatatong will welcome you giving them a sum of money for maintenance works. Then now, if that is done, then many problems are bound to arise because a number of people will visit it, and will that instill vigor into the village, and there may also be problems about cleanliness of the place and concerns on guided tours and so on. Has the government provided made any provisions for money to be spent on those regards? Will that be made a recurrent expenditure? Or will the village be responsible for it? 2 questions. Do you have any recurrent subsidies? And also, what is the established policy for declaration of monument? As we said, for Grade 1 historic buildings, they will be included in the list of the potential monuments, and for those which have found to be of high heritage value, then they will be declared as monuments. The spirit is really to preserve buildings of high heritage value, and that is that can serve public, and that is for public benefit. As for the opening up arrangements, that would depend on the purpose, the original purpose of the building. Now, as for the costs for the maintenance, that is not given over to the owner, and that is actually really for the contractors who carry out the maintenance works. Mr. Ming. The AMO will be directly responsible for carrying out the maintenance work. It's not being done by the owners. Secondly, Mr. Yu mentioned about cleaning up the place, management of the place, and guided tours and so on. Now, if an opening up arrangement is to be put in place, and it will be up to the AMO to discuss with the owners as to which parts should be opened up, how will the cleaning be done, and so on. As for guided tours, we have guided tour leaders who should be properly trained. And so during the opening up time, the guided tour leaders will be trained up and arranged for by the AMO. So for all these arrangements, we will have to negotiate with the owner through correspondences and other means. The cleaning work may not cost a lot, but then that has to be dealt with anyhow. We would also arrange for guided tours, and we would be negotiating with the owner and confirming the arrangement through correspondences with the owners. Now, would there be provisions for all these works to be undertaken? Yes, well, that would be included in the annual budget and estimate of ours. Second round, anybody know? If not, then I will. It's my turn to ask. I agree with Mr. Chen Yin-han. The government doesn't know how to make the best use of this monument, and is not giving the right answer to your question. Well, they are just harping the old lines from the paper. They are not taking the perspective of revitalizing the monument. They are just doing the basic work, the basic maintenance works, say, so that the paint won't fall down from the building and so on. So I think we should be working hard to catch up with the times on revitalizing the monuments. Well, there is so much more that we can do, but you are not doing it. In Japan, there are many revitalization projects. In Singapore, the same. It's such a pity. Now, their thinking is this. Now, well, we look at the clauses, it's Grade 1 historic building, and then we look at the clauses, it's going to be a monument, and so on. And they would just do that, the basic things, and they're not going to do anything to revitalize the building.
I deliberately went to Pingshan Heritage Trail last Sunday. It was an eyesore. It is inundated with storage, open storage for vehicles, and there are illegal structures. Tet-Tak Communal Hall is also right next to a private developer who is doing something there. So you have put a very valuable place down the drain. If you go to Pingshan Heritage Trail, there is Tet-Tak School. It could have become a monument, but now it is wasteland. It is so dirty, and I think it's so heartrending when you see this. and the administration has no plans whatsoever to do something. We are still convening this meeting, even if we support the two proposals, is because we like to have a discussion with the administration. Listening to you now, I believe even if you are given the green light to do this, I don't know whether in the end whether it will be opened up, and 2, whether it is accessible, and 3, whether people would actually be welcomed by the owners. So I'd like to ask you the question. Now you really are committed to doing something good, especially for Phat Tet Tong, because it's really a very pretty building. But would you also consider something? There are people living there. There are 5 families, and in fact you can build 5 houses on government land within the village and move them out, and then they can be asked to manage Phat Tet Tong later on. They will be happy because they still have a place to live, and they can still go back to the ancestral house, and some of the descendants can be guides. Why do you want other people to be guides? They are the best guides. They have been there for generations, and yet you seek to train up some people who are totally unrelated, and then these people will be telling visitors about the ancestors of these people who are still there. And when people ask questions, the guys would say, sorry, this is not what the books tell us, and we don't know. So I think you have to think out of the box. And my practical question for you is, apart from your maintenance program, does the government have a fund, a dedicated fund, which has the resources to allow us to seek the help of the descendants to work on the project? You can subsidize the opening up of the monument. And secondly, have you thought about this? Now, I actually say that you should acquire the building, but have you thought about moving out these descendants to 5 village houses, for example, in the same village on government land? Then we would be reassured about conserving the building and revitalizing it. Have you done that? Who will answer the question? Talking about your second question, under the existing policy, that is not such an arrangement. Since the owner has consented to conservation, but you mentioned that we acquired the building and asked them to live elsewhere by providing them with houses. Well, this is not the arrangement under the present policy. As for making sure that it will be opened up, in fact, there will be activities like open days, and we can liaise with the owners, and they can certainly take part in the guided tours as guides and introduce the property to visitors. We adopted that approach in the past. So you're saying there is no dedicated fund for doing this, apart from asking them to be guides. Well, at present, the AMO and the Development Bureau will organize these open days and guided tours every year. There will be resources for these activities whereby the people concerned can be asked to help. How many days will Phat Tet Tong be opened up to the public every year? We'll have to talk to the owner, but what about previously? There could be a period where there will be activities, and since there will be a certain number of historical buildings involved, usually we will have the activities on weekends or on holidays, and we'll liaise with the relevant organizations to take people to different historical buildings over a series of weekends. And there is a theme every year. We would seek to introduce different themes in different years. Usually this takes place in autumn when the weather is good. Too bad then. It means it will be opened up for 1 or 2 weeks in a year only. I will allow a third round. Chairman, can I please add something? We were talking about thematic visits just now. For example, a church or school, we do it by themes. and within a certain period of the year, we will do that as a main publicity stunt. But usually, monuments are also opened up as much as possible throughout the year. Certainly, there may be days during the year that the monument would be closed for cleaning, but basically, they are opened up throughout the year. You mean even for Fat Tat Tong, it will be open throughout the year? Yes. Third round, Ms. Chen Yunhan. Number one, my question for the administration is, I mentioned the same thing about Pok Fu Lam last time, dot, line, and plane. Well, you have muddled through your answers. There was Mr. Patrick Ho, who was the Antiquities Authority. He mentioned dot, line, and plane, and then there was much lightning, but there was no rain. I think it's quite sad. I'm concerned about employment and that every person should be able to have development on this piece of land. We can have tourism economy or culture economy. These are concerns close to my heart. My question for Mr. Ming is when? Secondly, as our colleague said, including my mention of Pak Chun Heung, and that brought me to an old structure, and that is Urban Council. That was the nurture of a group of people who knew much about arts and culture and antiquities. My friend Lemon Fai was very devoted. He worked on memorial services for Bruce Lee, etc. And you have nurtured a group of really good people. On the face of it, now Home Affairs is responsible, but it has a big portfolio. And I'm thinking about this all the time. I'm a district councillor, but we do not have the authority. And we have to cry at the top of our voices before we can have Kai Tak River, and so that we can have a water body within the old Kai Tak area, and also to preserve Longzhen Bridge. We spend so much effort on it, but the Urban Council was able to do it. If it were here, and now the administration can't do it, and who is going to take care of the task? Maybe the three officials may not be able to answer the question, but we do have Assistant Secretary for Heritage Conservation. So are we doing anything? This is the first building to be conserved, which is inhabited, and we are going to commit funding to it. I'm not saying we should get back our money's worth, but all the questions raised today should be well thought out by you. So is it Mr. Ming or Ms. Lee who will answer the question? Ms. Ko will not be able to answer me. She will just abide by the ordinance. But of course, I can still have many arguments with her over the ordinance, but I'm not going to do it today. So, heritage and monuments, you have to develop them, you want to preserve them, and turn them into even more prettier buildings. Who is going to do it? And then Mr. Patrick Ho did a lot of fanfare on dot, line, plane. Has that vaporized into thin air? Who is going to take care of that? Ms. Lee, I think Ms. Chan had wanted you to answer the question. Don't back out. Should I really take the question? At another subcommittee, we also mentioned dot, line, and plane. Actually, the administration has asked the AAB to look into consultation, and they would look into this as well. So it will be processed on that level. Which level? The AAB. Because the AAB is now doing a review, and within that review, this will be taken up. Who are the officials on AAB? We are the officials, including the Development Bureau. Can you do something to the timetable of the AAB? They are still doing the review. I think you have hesitated in answering me. Mr. Patrick Ho was a minister or bureau secretary in the era of Mr. C.H. Tung. He mentioned dot, line, plane. You should take a look at that consultation paper, and we had done a lot of work on that, but now it has somehow disappeared, and now you're still hesitating. Chairman, I hope we can write down all these questions and give them to the chairman of the House Committee. Let him talk to Mrs. Carrie Lam and ask Mrs. Carrie Lam who should be looking after all these issues. I don't want further delay. Number 2, which department should look after heritage and conservation to maintain and restore buildings? Fatted Tong, the AMO, the DSD, and also the CEDD, it is said. So who is ultimately responsible? Can we have an answer? This is in response to the Pingshan Heritage Trail mentioned by the chairman. If the government owns a historical building, departments will be responsible for maintenance and repair. Some historical buildings have been included in the revitalization plan so they can be put to better uses. And as for historical buildings owned by private owners, as I said, there is a funding scheme to provide incentive to private owners to do better maintenance and repair with the buildings. I don't think she's answering our question, Chairman. This is a subcommittee, Chairman. Well, I tried it and it could be done, and Dr. Lo Wai Kwok also channeled some questions to the House Committee that was about the exceedance of expenditure. So the House Chair took it to Carrie Lam. Now I can say that many people already spoke on these policies in previous administrations. After the abolition of the Urban Council, it was said that the powers would be delegated to the District Council, but it has not been the case. I hope you understand what I'm driving at, Chairman. Maybe we can give a report to the House Committee and ask for this to be dealt with. I don't want us to say a lot of things. Many members work very hard. They ask questions, and now they have gone nowhere. Yes, I have to tackle 2 things, Ms. Chan. First of all, we will certainly ask the House Committee and also the Development Panel to look at the issue. House Committee would be better. Take it to the CS4A. This is such a pretty building. The more I look at it, I like it better. What is going to happen to it? It will be opened for a short while during the year. We don't know about future changes. We don't know our rights. Ms. Chan, if we are not convinced by the officials here, we will do 2 things. One, we can have another meeting of the subcommittee because they will have to come back with a lot of papers, including a copy of the agreement and also the policy. In fact, we can consider asking the chairman of the AAB to come along and ask him or her to comment on the approach proposed. Especially Fatted Tong is an important landmark. We cannot just allow them to muddle through. In the end, if we are not happy with the answers, I will propose that we should have another meeting ASAP. Mr. Yu Si-wing, 3rd round. Okay. I agree that we should have an answer on the overall policy, and 2, how we should deal with these present proposals. I think we can do it in 2 steps. 1, you help the owner do the maintenance. Of course, he will say yes. I don't know whether he has said yes from the perspective of conservation of heritage or that he was simply happy because you were maintaining the property for him. I won't guess the motive of the owner, no matter what. When we decide to do maintenance, when we decide to declare the monument, we should iron out issues with the owner. For example, how much time would be for the opening up of the heritage building, and also what are the responsibilities and duties of the owner in future. These are concrete issues. In the entire process of proposing maintenance, I think you have to iron out these issues with the owner in order to prevent future arguments. If you say this will be for 20 years, then within 20 years at least there will be no arguments. I don't know whether you can do that. Secondly, the overall policy. You said the LCSD and the AMO work separately. the LCSD would work on it, and then the AMO will be responsible for guided tours, cleaning, and maintenance and repair. If that's the case, it will be extremely problematic. The LCSD will require the owner to do certain things or give promises, but then that may not go through to the AMO. Now, this is about the people who live there, and yet 2 departments are involved. So have you clarified everything with the owner, minor works and cleaning, etc.? Did you tell the owner who will be responsible for those? And also, what about daily operation costs? Who will shoulder them? And then the guided tours, what will be the arrangements? Don't say that there will be 2 departments taking care of the matter and that's it. Don't allow them to pass the buck. I think you should iron out all these issues right from the outset.
Mr. Ming, let me add this. The AMO is under LCSD. So for the maintenance works and the opening up arrangements, those will be dealt with by the AMO. Now, who is going to be responsible for the maintenance works is also the AMO. So, yes, is within one umbrella, so to speak. Yes. Would you consider, before carrying out the maintenance works, agree on certain conditions with the owners? Well, we've asked this question many times. You don't have the conditions, or is it the case that you do have the conditions and you dare not present them to us? Well, as for the specific arrangements, say the arrangements for opening up and the arrangement for cleaning work on security arrangement, repairs and so on, which parts would be opened up and so on. All these details need to be discussed with the owner before we can give you the specifics. So we have to talk with the owners first. Now, as for the basic arrangements, say the maintenance costs, that can be applied for, and then that will be undertaken by AMO. Now, the cleaning up work and the security work for opening up, we can arrange for the funding, and for maintenance and repair works, we can also undertake that. But we have to hammer out the details with the owner before we can give you the specifics. Well, if you can undertake to do that, then we will get the proposal endorsed in the next meeting. Next one, Mr. Ma Fong Kwok. Thank you, Chairman. Why do we have to say so much about this project? I think that is something for the government's consideration. I think that is the first step, that the government declare these 2 buildings monuments. Well, over 10 members have agreed to attend this meeting because we attach a lot of importance to these issues. I think the government has done something, but the work is not sufficient. Let me share my experience during the summer vacation and Christmas last year. I went to Yanpeng, Pingshan, and in Christmas I went to Luoding. And actually I visited many old and ancient villages, and then the county, the town, and the city governments have in the past demolished a lot of old buildings, but in the past few years they've attached a lot more importance to these ancient monuments and heritage buildings. Some of these monuments have been taken over by the city and the town government, and they are being revitalized into museums and tourist spots, and they've been doing a good job. Now, of course, their requirements and their standards are a little bit different from those of ours, but you can tell that they are very proactive in their efforts. Ms. Chen Yuhan showed us some pictures of beautiful pictures of architectural buildings, which can be seen in many parts of the mainland. And actually, some of these houses are being occupied by the original residents, and the government has hammered out a lot of conditions and agreements with these residents. Now, I agree that Fat Tet Tong should be included in the list of revitalization projects, not just declaring it as monument, because we have a limited number of such buildings in Hong Kong. The chairman talked about Tech School, which is also a very building of high heritage value. I wonder why the government has not included that in the list this time. I agree that we should spend more time on discussing these issues, but in any case, I would support the declaration this time. But then the government has not been doing enough, and it's very seldom that members of different political persuasions come to this agreement that we should be more concerned about this policy area. And I hope that the government can take more initiative in this area. I don't need the government to respond. Now, if we need further discussions on the subject, I would definitely attend the meetings. But I don't agree that because there is something unclear, we should bar the endorsement of this piece of notice. Now, if there are no more members wishing to speak, let me deal with it like this. Ms. Koh said that under the present policy, there may be differences among different buildings. For the Sun Yat-sen Memorial Hall, before that was there was renovation, the government also said the same thing. That has never been any policy. And ultimately, and fortunately, Ms. Chen Yinhan was not there. The Patrick Ho, the then secretary, believed that exceptional arrangements should be put in place. I wonder whether Mr. Ping was there at the time. We spent some $50 million on the project and allowed this Latter Saints Church in Wan Chai, giving them the spot there as a place of exchange. Or, if the government didn't change that policy at that time, we wouldn't have the Sun Yat-sen Memorial Museum today. Now, if you don't have past or established policies, well, you can change the policies now. For this project, it deserves our out-of-box thinking. The government should make good use of this opportunity this time. Well, I don't think we can get anything more if we continue asking the administration to say. Well, I suggest that we have we can propose 2 dates. The expiry of scrutiny period can be is 26th of February 2014. I suggest that we allow time for the administration to respond to our several questions. Well, I'll list them now. First is about the content of the agreement signed with the owner. And second, the opening up time, format, and the costs involved as agreed in the agreement. Third, the maintenance costs, the estimates for the maintenance costs. Fourth, Ms. Koh said that the AAB is doing a review on arrangements regarding dot line plane for development. We hope that the AAB chairman or members can attend the meeting next time to share their views on this very particular monument. We would also allow time for the administration to think about some policy considerations, such as whether they can consider talking to the owners to acquire the building, also whether land exchanges can be arranged. Well, all these are not new initiatives. Well, if not for these new initiatives, we wouldn't have the Sun Yat-sen museum today. Now, lastly, I wonder whether members would like to go on a site visit. We don't have much time, though. Now, if necessary, the clerk can arrange for a site visit. If not, then members can go individually. Well, the one in Pingshan is just next to the West Rail station. And for Fat Tat Tong, actually, people can drive there. If members don't have any objection to my proposals, we'll arrange for the next meeting then. Well, for the site visit, you can consult the members. All right, after the meeting, we'll circulate, say, a timetable to, say, arrange for a visit to the place on the weekdays, on the weekends. Well, we'll make sure that the date doesn't clash with your our meeting schedule. Now, for Communal Hall, it is not accessible because it has been hoarded up by fences. Now, at the front, the drainage works have been completed, and Phase 1 restoration works have been completed. Now, for the rear part, we'll have to wait till the slope improvement works have been completed. Well, not every part is accessible. Well, we can take a look at in the vicinity areas. Well, Sha Tao Kok is not that far away, actually. After the meeting, we can make arrangements with the clerk and the administration. Any views? And also about the publicity arrangements. We aren't satisfied with the administration's work. Well, we agree with the government's declaring these two buildings monuments, but we don't want to see that these two monuments are not being put to good use. If no other views, then I'll declare the meeting adjourned today. Thank you.